All right, it is 8 o'clock. Let's settle down. I've got my drink poured up. Cats are quiet for now. So, let's just sit back and get settled, shall we? I don't know about you guys, but it's been a fun week, shall we say. A little busy, hectic here and there. So, starting off the weekend right. All right. So, last time we left off, um, it was after the apparent betrayal of the Ravagers, but that was quickly found out to be not so much a betrayal but a corruption at the highest ranks. So the Conclave has been up to their no good manipulation of things behind the scenes at more than just Sosaria. Um, so that's been brought to light and cut off at the head. And we got Drossin in charge of the Ravagers now. And then they had the confrontation, not direct, but the confrontation with Adura, where he kidnapped a few of the crew, and Lark went off on the rescue and was hurt in the process. And then we had a chapter or two of the convalescence and a few little vignettes into the daily life of the crew as they were starting to take center stage. So we're starting to see more of the cast having a little bit more of a prominent position as we're going on. It's always nice with an ensemble piece like this where the crew is every bit as important as sorry, the crew is every bit as important as Lark and the other locals, and even the rest of the crew is every bit as important as Angel and Akron. So we're seeing their personalities come to light and really pop in those little side stories where there's a moment of peace between big events. Um, and judging by the way things are looking, we are probably going to be going into a new pit of vipers, as they say, as they go into the star canopies to find the tree people. What are they called around here? Treekin? Uh, but yeah, Treekin. So that'll be probably the next adventure, and we'll see if they can find the solution to the disease that's ailing them and bring them back up to full strength in time to participate in this grand alliance that's forming around the center of with the Forerunners at the center. Now that they've decided that the Prime Directive be damned, they're stepping into this fight themselves. So let's go ahead and just jump right back into it, and we'll see where the story takes us. Beginning back from chapter 19 of Archblade, Legend of the Defiler. The Star Canopies are the most unique location on Durance. Secrets lie in wait, guarded by its devoted protectors. Passing into the Star Canopies was like passing under a great veil. The Treekin lived in the heart of the great forest, and Lauren began the task of navigating to their settlement. They had to stay beneath the thick boughs, and often she felt like she was threading a needle to get the Forerunner safely through. The sight outside was awe-inspiring, and one by one the crew members came to the bridge, lured by the view through the windows of their rooms. Finally, they all stood crowded together on the bridge as they basked in the sight. The trees were colossal, with the very tallest pressing against the barrier. Leaves larger than their ship blocked out the sunlight and plunged the forest into perpetual night. Many were thick enough for a group of people to stand on, with their weight fully supported. They ranged in shade from a muted black to a vibrant green. Despite the cover, the forest wasn't dark. It was alive with light and color. The leaf veins glowed brilliant white and cast the world below in slashes of light. A herd of quadrupeds was grazing around the trunks, but when the sound and smell of the Forerunner caught up to them, they dashed to safety. Their golden pelts winked in the light as they disappeared into the old growth. I thought Star Canopies was just a fancy name, Maya murmured breathlessly. No, some of the tallest trees can go to the atmosphere's edge. I have no idea how they support their own weight, or how they survive the environment. The treekin use essence magic to encourage growth and cultivate the younger plants. But there's so much about them we don't understand, Lark explained. They really do look like stars in the night sky, Lily remarked, studying the veins from her vantage as best she could. It's beautiful. Nothing akin to the trees we have at home, Reynard agreed. All right, everyone. I think we've appreciated the forest long enough, Akron's voice carried over the boisterous conversation. Let's get back to our positions and try to make a good first impression here. The crew slowly left, except for himself, Lauren, Dravik, and Lark. Akron walked forward and turned his attention down to Lauren at her console. Any trouble getting around those giant trees? Only a little, Captain. The treekin were nice enough to provide a direct route to their home through the thinner parts of their forest. We should be there within a few hours. Despite the confidence in her voice, her eyes were fixed on the screen as she carefully made the smallest corrections to their trajectory. Considering we developed a cure for the disease, the least they could do is help us find our way there to give it to them, Dravik grumbled. You must understand that they are meticulous about letting people into their forest. The trees here would have been harvested nearly to extinction centuries ago if they didn't guard them so fervently, Lark faced the senior engineer as he made the impassioned argument. Sounds like a sensible reason to me, Akron commented, returning to his chair. Dravik, you should be in the drive room, if I remember the duty roster correctly. The thinly veiled order was posed as a question, but the intent was clear. Get off the bridge and go to work. Yes, sir, Dravik chortled and headed to the drive room. Lark continued to watch the screen, still transfixed by the view despite the many times before he had seen it. He was fully healed, except for the occasional bouts of weakness in his hands and feet. Every day, he sparred with Angel, and found it had accelerated his recovery. Did you need me somewhere in particular? He inquired. No, you can do whatever you want until we get there. I just enjoy reminding my crew that they actually have jobs to do sometimes, Akron laughed. Lark shared in his amusement as he glanced at the people around him. He had become very fond of the crew of the Forerunner, and started to feel much closer to them than he had to those back home. "What is Angel up to?" Akron inquired as he sipped the tea Tarn had brought up with him. "She was up all night with a transmission to the Treekin. It took a lot of convincing that this cure is legitimate and not just false hope or a scam," Lark explained. "So she's getting some rest before we show up and meet with the matriarch." "What kind of person is the matriarch?" Lauren piped up, still watching the screen. "Alicia? I haven't talked with her much, but I remember she and my father were on good terms. He told me she was a wise and great leader of her people, albeit a little overly cautious." Lark balked at the memory and felt a small wave of apprehension for what might come. "Sounds as though Darian spent a lot of time with the leaders of the other peoples of Durance," Akron observed. "He did. Anytime there was a call for aid, my father was the first to respond, either alone or with troops behind him. His priority was always to help each province regardless of who or where they were." Lark focused on the wall and closed his eyes in frustration. "I've tried to continue his legacy, but we've been held up with petty conflicts, and the council putting in some new law or regulation every day." "How did your people end up under the thumb of Vamed and the council? It sounds like almost no one is happy with the change in leadership," Akron observed as he finished the last of his tea. "Adora launched a major offensive against Sosaria 4 years ago. Thousands of Conclave troops descended on the outlying settlements in the dead of night. Almost all the settlements were destroyed, along with a significant portion of our army. My mother and father were among those that died." Lark's anger rose as he spoke. "There was a campaign, initiated by Vamed and some of the higher-placed members of the Sosarian society. They claimed that the losses resulted from the king having too much power, and that the people needed to have more of a say in how the kingdom was run. He spread propaganda, saying the people had lost their greatest heroes because of the monarchy, and it swung the balance in his favor. Ultimately, they succeeded. And now, Various must watch those greedy cowards run my home into the ground." An awkward silence fell over the room. With a frustrated shake of his head, Lark excused himself to go check in the medical bay about the blight cure. The silence persisted after he left, until Lauren eventually spoke. "I think you hit a nerve," she said quietly. "Obviously," Akron responded dryly. "I didn't realize the change in government happened at the same time his parents died." Lauren scoffed. "I bet the moment Vamed heard Lark's parents had fallen, he started enacting his plans. Not only did it give him a perfect launching point, but they probably would have been the greatest opposition to his seizing power." Akron pinched the bridge of his nose. Political situations involving shifting governments were always taxing, and he tried to avoid them at all costs. Looking up at the view screen, he watched the endless sea of ghostly rainbow lights and forced his thoughts on what was to come next. Angel stood in her dress uniform before the matriarch of the Treekin. She held her chin high as Lark introduced her and spoke about the Forerunner crew. The matriarch's sanctum was the heart of the Treekin settlement, and in the boughs of the largest tree. From it spiraled dozens of structures across other trunks and interconnected them with a network of bridges. To say she had been intimidated when she was led into the otherwise unassuming building was an understatement. A crowd of nearly 30 Treekin stood by and watched with equal parts curiosity and suspicion as she and Lark took their places in the middle of the room. Young saplings flanked the simple wooden throne and illuminated the matriarch with a radiant halo. 4 stood on either side of the throne in pairs. There were 2 females and 2 males, and they all wore the same passive expression. Flanking Lark and Angel were a pair of heavily armed guards. From the corner of her eye, Angel realized they wielded lacquered wooden weapons, but judging by the gleaming edge of the sword, she had no doubt they would cut as effectively as steel. She had missed the chance to see any Treekin in Sosaria, but up close they were unmistakable. Their bodies were lean, and their skin was the color of the trees themselves. Most of their hair colors were pale, but there were also many red and black-haired individuals among the Treekin she had passed on her way to the meeting. She could tell by their structures and the way they handled themselves that they were a proud people, which made it that much more difficult to see them afflicted by the blight. During the entire walk to the sanctum, she saw adults and children with blemishes and sickly pallor. Those affected the worst shambled and listlessly around, reminding her of the undead creatures they had seen before. I find it hard to believe that Conclave created the Blight, son of Darien, Alicia's voice carried out and echoed from across the trees. She was regal-looking and taller than almost every other person in the room. She wore a green silk gown and a thin platinum crown across her black hair. Despite the delicate clothing, it was clear to see she was a strong and agile woman. Her arms had clearly defined muscles, and even the wave of her hand showed an undeniable grace. Her skin was as mottled as the rest of her people, but she appeared only to have the most minor signs of the disease. I didn't believe it at first, Your Grace, he concurred, but these people have advanced scientific technology that allows them to examine biological material to a far greater degree than we can. They used it to cure the Ravagers, when we found they had started to become corrupted as well. Yes, I heard about that. Her silvery eyes turned to Angel and pinned her where she stood. Your people were responsible for helping them. Yes, Your Grace, Angel repeated, the same honorific, suddenly worried she might offend the woman. I see. And what did they have to give up in return? Her expression was placid, despite the challenge of her words. Nothing, Angel stated firmly. We just wanted to help in any way we could. The only request we made was to learn about their people and culture, and it wasn't a condition for our help. And this is the same offer you make to us for the cure? Alicia's eyebrow raised, and she placed her folded hands in her lap. Yes. We would love to learn about your people, and about this incredible home you have. However, if we can't, we will still give you the cure, and show you how to make enough for all your people. She bowed, feeling immediately awkward at trying to set terms with such an imposing figure. Alicia turned to the other aged Treekin in the sanctum. No words were exchanged, but the tiniest facial expressions seemed to communicate their thoughts. Angel looked to Lark, who gave her a quick smile of reassurance. Very well, Alicia finally said, and stood from her throne. The guards immediately bowed and backed away from Angel, who resisted the urge to retreat from the approaching woman. You will use this cure on me. If it is successful, we will distribute it to the population, and we may speak about a culture exchange. Test on you? Angel's heart felt as though it would burst out of her chest. I thought we would test it on one of your soldiers or someone else, she stammered as she searched around for help or another volunteer. No, I will be the first. I am responsible for the lives of my people, and I will accept the risk before I ask them to do so. She approached Angel with confident steps and extended her arm. I am ready. Angel swallowed hard and pressed the device against Alicia's forearm, while silently begging her hands to stop shaking. The seconds passed by slowly, before Angel pulled the device back and looked at the matriarch while trying her best to hide her fears. How do you feel? Lark asked tentatively. His eyes flicked between the device and Alicia as his anxiety began to spike, matching Angel's. Her lips pulled into a frown. I feel no different. Perhaps you're... Ah! She staggered back as though kicked and hit the ground on one knee. Struggling, rasping breaths rose from her tight throat, and she clutched her chest. Matriarch! Nearly every voice cried, but was quickly drowned out by the creaking of the armed Treekin advancing to aid their leader. The tension in the room was so great the slightest thing could cause it to burst. Wait! Alicia panted, and held up an open palm to halt the encroachment of her guards. I felt a sudden rush of weakness. It is nothing. The treatment is destroying many of your infected cells, and rapidly replicating your healthy ones. A bit of initial weakness is normal, as your body tries to adjust. Angel tried to sound confident, despite her body trembling and beads of sweat dripping from her brow. The matriarch of the Treekin steadied herself, and stood straight. Her eyes opened wide, as she took a long, deep breath, and then another. She no longer rasped or rattled, as her lungs continued to regain their full capacity. The room drew in a collective breath, as the blemishes receded, until they disappeared entirely. Her skin was dewy and youthful for the first time in decades. My lady? One of the aged Treekin advisors approached, putting a tentative hand on her arm. Carefully, she turned and smiled warmly. I am well, uncle. I feel better than I have in many, many years. She embraced him tightly, and then her attention fell on Angel once again. Angel beamed and felt her fear melt away. The blight will take a few days to disappear from your body completely. You'll want to get some extra rest to help your body recover. Alicia nodded, tears shamelessly falling from her eyes. And you can do this for all my people? Of course! We can show you how to do it, and we should be able to have the entire forest treated in a day or two, Angel responded excitedly. Without warning, Alicia grabbed Angel and pulled her in for a crushing hug, garnering a startled squeak in response. After a moment, she put the young woman down and all but ran to her throne. Ascending the dais, she stood proudly and addressed the sanctum. "Send word through the farthest tree of our forest. The crew of the Forerunner have come to cure us of the blight, and shall be given every concession and aid they need to heal our people. They are to be considered friends, and will have free rein to explore our home and learn of our ways." Her voice rang high, and Angel could swear she heard it resonating around her and into the forest beyond. The crowd scattered, and even the guards and advisors exited the sanctum, talking excitedly amongst themselves, setting out to spread the news. Angel sent a message through her pad to Akron, telling him that the meeting went perfectly and that they would all be busy for the next couple of days. Lark was at her side in an instant, enveloping her in his arms and pulling her chin up to kiss her tenderly. She melted against him, rested her head against his chest, and savored the sound of his heartbeat. Between his arms and the resolved situation, her energy flagged, and she felt fatigued. "I would speak with both of you, privately," Alicia requested from behind them. They whipped around in surprise to see the sincerity in her eyes. "Of course," Lark bowed. "Just lead the way." Alicia then led the pair from the sanctum. A simple wooden bridge took them higher and higher around the tree trunk to where they could no longer see the ground. At the end was a sizable, opulent structure built into the body of a tree. A pair of guards waited at the entrance and bowed before opening a curtain made of green, lacy material. After entering, Alicia sighed and set her crown on a small pillow before giving Angel another hug. "You may have saved my people," she whispered, now looking between the two with great admiration. "Words can never express how grateful I am that you have saved us from the horrible fate of wasting away." "We're glad to help, Matriarch," Angel asserted as she stepped back. "We've suffered at the hands of the Conclave as well, and we couldn't stand by knowing we could help you." "Please, call me Alicia. When I am alone and get the rare chance to remove my crown, I enjoy a more casual setting." She waved for them to sit. Various cushions and chairs surrounded a low table. Lark and Angel sat on a large cushion together, and Alicia sat across the table on her own chair. "It allows me to speak plainly, like how I know you wish for us to join with your allies to fight the Conclave with you." Angel gasped in surprise, and her eyes went almost fearfully wide as she tried to hide her surprise. I'm sorry, we wanted to make sure each person was cured before discussing that. We would never want to give the impression that the cure was hinged on you having to join our alliance." Alicia nodded, amused at her response. "I know that, Angel, but I wanted to be certain we cleared this up immediately to get past the unpleasantness. We will not be fighting the Conclave." A strained silence seemed unending between the three, before Lark sadly sighed. "We understand." Angel's mouth opened and shut a few times as she attempted to process the absurdity of the moment. She tried and failed to regain her composure, but it was impossible for her not to be angry. "No, we most certainly do not understand." Alicia stiffened. Her eyes narrowed at the audacity of Angel's words. "Our purpose is to preserve the forest, our people, and our way of life. Wasting our lives to fight a needless conflict does none of that," she explained, her poise unable to hide the tightness of her jaw. Lark put a hand on Angel's shoulder and shook it a little to get her attention. "We need to respect their decision." Angel gave a violent shrug to force his hand away. "The Conclave tried to wipe your people out. Do you think they'll just leave you alone now that you're cured? They will find another way to destroy you, and next time, you might not be able to stop them." "You don't know that. Now that we know what they are capable of, we can defend ourselves that much better." Alicia stood and gazed down at her. Angel rose to meet her, refusing to be intimidated this time by the matriarch's imposing height. She was far too angry for that. They tried to wipe out the Stonekin, and found a way around the Ravagers of magic immunity to corrupt them. They will never stop. Lark's eyes widened, and he swallowed hard, caught between wanting to stop the escalating situation and worried he might make it worse by saying something. Alicia's eyes were alight with quiet fury. "You are a stranger to our world, Angel. While I appreciate what you have done for my people, you have no idea what you are talking about." Angel's breath came in short gasps, but she pushed through her anxiety as she stared up at the Treekin matriarch. "You're right. I am a stranger, but we've been fearing for our lives ever since we got here. I have seen unimaginable evil, and the victims it leaves behind. As though pain, she closed her eyes, as her mind was flooded with memories of the little girl in Sosaria, and the anguish on Drossen's face as he watched his own father turn into a monster. Forcing herself to focus on the present, she shook her head. I'm done arguing about this. Obviously, this changes nothing about the cure, but I won't be a part of it. I can't bear to look into the eyes of your people, knowing you were just going to sit back and watch them die all over again. Right as she reached the exit, she turned back to face Alicia one more time, her eyes full of sorrow. I admire your people so much for surviving everything so far. I love your beautiful forest, and how you have fought so hard to preserve it. But the one thing I hate more than the Conclave is watching you fall into their trap of isolating yourself to help them destroy your home. Without waiting for a response, she brushed past the guards and was gone. Alicia stood speechless, unaccustomed to being spoken to in such a fashion, while also feeling the deep cut of Angel's words. She turned to Lark, hoping for some positive discourse or apology, but he was already rushing to follow Angel outside. That brings us to the end of chapter 19. And Angel got angry, coming out of her shell a little bit more. I think Lark is good for her. And being shoved into this ambassadorship by Akron when she was definitely not of the temperament for it is kind of forcing her to grow into the role, I think. It's, yeah, she's right. It was like, my opinion of Alicia is kind of whiplashy, if I'm being honest. Like, when she first showed up, it was kind of the standard haughty, almost elven style. Probably what you were intending there. But then when she stepped forward to be the first volunteer of the test case, you're like, oh, okay, she's good. She's keeping an eye out for her people. And then the enforced neutrality is disappointing, I should say. I understand where she's coming from, not wanting to throw her people into a conflict immediately after recovering from a plague, but it's disappointing nonetheless. We'll see if they'll come around while they're here and are exposed to Lark and the Forerunner's crew's passions and the other things that are happening. Yeah, I imagine so. Alright, well, let's carry on with Chapter 20. Things are moving faster now. A momentum is gaining that cannot be stopped. Lark had never been a skilled tracker, but fortunately, Angel wasn't that hard to follow. He was more than capable of following the loud running and the looks of confused treekin to see where she had gone. She was headed back to the Forerunner, and by all signs, he was gaining on her. Rounding the corner, he found her on a dead-end walkway that was nestled into the bark of a tree. As he slowly approached, he saw she was leaning against the railing. She held the black wood so tight her knuckles were white, and choked sobs escaped her lips. "Do you want to be alone?" he asked, cautiously, as he got closer. "I don't know," she admitted without turning to him. "I know I shouldn't have lost my temper back there, but I just can't handle how these people refuse to fight for themselves." Lark put a gentle hand on her back, still unsure what he should do, and certain that leaving her alone wasn't right either. Angel suddenly turned and embraced him tightly with her arms around his neck. "I'm sure you're very sorry for what you said," he soothed, gently stroking her hair. She pulled her head back and stared at him. Her sadness had faded and her anger renewed. "No, I'm not! I was right about what I said, even if I should have kept my anger in check." Lark's expression turned from consolation to shock and frustration. "You can't just march in and tell these people how to live their lives, Angel. It's wrong!" She groaned in exasperation and pressed back against the railing. "I'm not trying to change their culture, Lark. I'm trying to help them save their own lives. You know as well as I do that they need to fight, and that the Conclave will never leave them alone." "That might be true, but yelling at them and forcing them into it isn't the way. You don't have the right to single-handedly make drastic changes in how an entire race lives," he explained, trying to keep his own anger in check. "You mean like you did with Raze?" She folded her arms. Words failed him, his mind going blank from the realization of her question. He stammered for a couple of seconds before eventually finding the words to argue. "That's different." "How?" was more of a challenge than a question. He was going to kill all of you. He was insane and corrupted with entropy magic. He was going to doom his entire race by going to war with the Stonekin. His breathing sped up as he defended his reasoning, but as he spoke, he could feel its lack of impact, even on himself. Alicia may not be corrupted, but she is going to doom her people just as Ray's was with the Ravagers. Her cold stare bore right through him. Lark stepped from her and rubbed his face with both palms in exasperation. As the seconds ticked on, Angel growled in frustration. Still anticipating an argument, she stood straight and demanded, "Well?" "Well, nothing," he repeated quietly. "I still disagree with what you did, but I can't refute your logic either." Angel was disarmed by his words, and she visibly relaxed. "You did tell me I should act with my heart," she reminded him. Lark burst out laughing and shook his head. "I damn well did, didn't I? I should be more careful about the advice I give you." He went to her and wrapped his arms around her tightly. Angel buried her head in his chest. She hadn't known what to expect from her first argument with him. Now it was all over, and they still looked at each other with the same love and adoration they had before. Not for the first time, she felt she had made the right choice as she closed her eyes and listened to the light breeze dancing through the branches. She mused about how serene and beautiful this place was, and it almost reminded her of the forests back home. With that sudden realization, she pulled away and took a deep breath. "Lark, what will you do when this is all over?" He blinked in surprise at the sudden change of topic. "I don't know. Most of my life has been dedicated to fighting in this conflict. I never even thought it would end in my lifetime. Why do you ask?" Her heart pounded so hard she was certain he could hear it, and her face grew hot as a burning need to ask him what would be a difficult question overcame her. "I need to know what will happen with us if we win and the Forerunner can return home." She looked into his eyes as her desperation for an answer warred between not wanting to push him and the desire to ask him outright to come with her. The silence stretched on as Lark searched her eyes for answers, feeling questions of his own demanding to be spoken as well. The longer he went without speaking, the more she looked crestfallen. Finally, he took her hand reverently in his. "I would be happiest if I could come with you," he declared almost apprehensively, as though he was afraid his confession might make her run away again. Seeing her stay rooted to the spot, eager for him to continue, he grew bolder. With a step forward, he pressed their foreheads together and pulled her close. "I've come to love you, and I've also grown attached to the rest of the crew as well. Seeing the stars, exploring new worlds, visiting the place that made you who you are, would be a wonderful adventure. But are you sure Akron would be okay with that?" Relief and joy filled her as she threw her arms around him and kissed him fiercely. "I know he would. He likes you, and so does the rest of the crew. On top of that, the frequency technology will be an enormous benefit to our people. And you coming back with us will make researching it that much easier." Drawing him in for another kiss, she felt the desire to cry still present, but it was for the joy of his answer and not the lack of it. Maya sat, letting out a deep breath after Tarn helped her set the table down. She had spent the previous half hour rushing to get a medical station set up outside the ship to start treating the vast crowd of Treekin that had gathered, and she was somewhat winded. "I think I'm good here, thank you, Tarn," she called across the wide station as she set out small cases of refills for the medical injectors. Tarn offered a hint of a smile, largely obscured by his curled mustache, before heading back inside the ship to assist Lily with her task of moving more medical supplies to the other parts of the colony. Maya began organizing her station. She was always meticulous in her work, and this time was no different. As she lined up the injector cartridges, she didn't notice the soft footsteps approaching until she saw black boots on the other side of her table. With a start, she looked up to see a young Treekin woman smiling at her. She was a bit shorter than Maya, with pale, almost platinum hair shaven on the sides and braided across the top. A cape, as green as the foliage that crept along the forest floor, was pushed back, showing off her leather armor. "You're Reika, aren't you?" Maya asked. "You were one of the first to volunteer to get the cure. How are you feeling? With a slight bow of respect, Reika spoke with a smile. I am well. My aunt is occupied with her counselors and asked me to come and aid you. Maya felt a wave of relief at the offer. She had been unsure about the sheer number of people she would have to treat, and having someone there as an intermediary would make things much more manageable. Are you sure? She inquired, despite her eagerness. You don't have responsibilities elsewhere. Reika observed the way Maya had organized her station, went to the next one. I am den mother for our bonded, and am charged with their care. However, so long as we eventually treat them as well, I can make this part of my duties. Before Maya could thank her... Oh, Is YouTube being a pain? Oh, I think we're okay. Before Maya could thank her, a young woman holding an infant stepped forward and carefully pleaded if the cure was ready. Maya took the opportunity to show Reika how to load the medical injector and how simple it was to administer the treatment. The baby let out a slight whine, but he soon fell asleep after his mother held him close and whispered a lullaby. After being treated herself, the mother gave a tearful thank you and stepped away from the table. She sat at the base of the nearest tree and watched as her child was cured of the blight she feared would have killed them both. Quick pause. Bit of a thunderstorm in these parts, so if it hiccups a little bit too much, or if YouTube doesn't mind its own business, I'll take a pause, but I think for now we're okay. We'll see if it continues or if it gets worse. We'll try and push through, but if it gets bad, I don't want to miss paragraphs as I deal with buffering. So we'll see. We'll play it by ear, but for now we'll push through. Alright. Tearing her eyes away from the young mother, Reika picked up the spare injector and started to treat those at the head of the line. Maya was impressed with how easily she handled herself using what was undoubtedly new technology. Maya rushed along with her, prioritizing children and their families. Some worried there wouldn't be enough for everyone, and nearly declined the medicine for fear of taking it away from someone else in more need of it. Maya reassured them that there was plenty for all, and true to her word, everyone was getting their chance. Silently, she hoped that Lily and the others were doing just as well at the other stations they set up. She watched as many of the children and their parents sat in groups to rest and sleep off the initial weakness brought on by the cure. Within the hour, the crowd appeared more full of life, and many ran home for the sheer joy they finally could. Hours later, during a minor lull, Maya turned to Reika, who was talking to one of the small children and braiding his hair. She pulled a bottle of water from the cooling unit that Tarn had brought and then grabbed one for the young Treekin woman. Reika took it with a delighted thank you and drank it heartily before returning her attention to the next person in line. I must admit, I didn't believe this was possible when we first heard the news of your cure. It wasn't easy, I can say that much at least, Maya replied with a chuckle. But seeing everyone here makes it all worth it. A grateful father with 4 children at his heels broke from the crowd and rushed Maya. She had no time to react before she was swept up into a fierce hug, something she had received many times throughout the day. Thank you, he gasped as his tears fell. My children have a chance at life, thanks to you. With strange breath, Maya did her best to pat his back. We are happy to help. Setting her down, he nodded to Reika before taking his children back to their home. After regaining her breath, she reloaded her injector and waved to the diminishing crowd. We can focus on your animal friends after we are done here. Hopefully, Lily has also figured out the best way to cure your trees by now. Reika and a few treekin at the front of the group stopped and stared at her bewilderedly. Our trees aren't sick, she explained with confusion. Really? We heard reports in Sosari about the forest being struck with the blight as well, Maya answered, feeling a red blush creeping on her cheeks. Shows how outdated their information on us is, the young woman retorted with a laugh. We were worried about that at first, but we spent endless nights with our lifestones, keeping them healthy, and our forest could resist the sickness. It has helped us push on until now. The stones didn't work for your people at all? Maya asked as she pulled out her pad and sent a message to Lily about the trees. Our form of essence magic only works on plants, Reika explained, as she began treating another small group. We use the fossilized stones of our ancestry trees to amplify it. which helped grow our great forest. We never use it for ourselves or in combat, so after many years, it has adapted to serve our home exclusively. Maya almost questioned further, but then noticed for the first time in hours, no one else was waiting. She came from behind her station and looked around before calling out if anyone nearby needed treatment. Once certain everyone was cared for, she contacted Akron and gave him an update. Then, with Reika's help, they packed up her supplies to move on to the bonded mounts. Lark and Angel spent the evening talking and watching the settlement bustle from the disbursement of the cure from their private perch that overlooked the Forerunner. Late into the night, Angel fell asleep, leaning against Lark's shoulder with his arm around her waist. He sat pensively gazing at the forest and wondering about the events to come. Morning visited the forest subtly, through the sounds of birds and the stirring of its inhabitants. Determined steps and a soft cough got Lark's attention. He turned to the one who interrupted their peace. Angel stirred and followed his gaze with bleary eyes as she stifled a yawn. A Treekin guard stood stiffly and addressed them. The matriarch requests an audience. Lark swallowed hard, fearing a recurrence of the previous night's argument. So, you're to lead us to the sanctum then? The guard shook his head. No, sir. She said she wanted a more casual setting, and that the two of you would know what that meant. Angel stood and blinked in surprise. She wants to see me as well? Yes, my lady. She was adamant about that. Without further explanation, the guard whipped around and left the way he came. Lark stood beside Angel, patting the leaf fragments from his pants. Let's get this over with then, he muttered. Want me to just smile and nod? Angel asked sarcastically, but it was not as full of anger as it had been before. I know better than that, he snorted in derision. Just let her talk first. If she wants to let out her frustration, then we can listen. If she wants to talk civilly, I could just head back to the ship and hope you don't cause a diplomatic disaster. I hope you're joking, she grumbled and bumped him. Only a little. Alicia isn't going to do anything drastic, and you've already said your piece. I doubt anything serious will happen. He pulled her close as they started to walk towards the private chamber. She might hate me. Think you could handle that? Despite her bravado, she was nervous about the upcoming conversation. You could enrage every leader, politician, and important person on Durance, and I would still love you. His tone was deadly serious. After a moment's thought, he shot her a mischievous grin. Perhaps even more so if you upset the right people back home. Angel laughed hard at that, shattering the tension and discomfort of the foreboding meeting with the leader of the Treekin. Alicia was sitting on a deep purple cushion, the crown again resting on its pillow. Lark and Angel came to a stop when they crossed the curtain and found that the 4 advisors were also in attendance. They took their seat at the end of the table and found that once they sat on their cushions, each Treekin was at the same height, including Alicia. Under the table, the pair held hands, and Lark gave her fingers a comforting squeeze. The Treekin matriarch regarded them with tired eyes and a cautious smile before she turned to Lark. You were silent during our exchange, Defiler. He shook his head and held up his hands in helpless defense. I was caught between 2 extremely strong-minded women. I knew better than to try and add a third person to the argument. Very wise. Her smile melted to a look of contrition as she turned her attention to Angel. And as for you, my dear, I owe you an apology. Angel's expression softened, disarmed by her words. I could have handled myself better, or so I've been told. No, Alicia affirmed. I have come to realize that I was indeed short-sighted. I have spent the entire night discussing the topic with my family and advisors, and we have found there is merit in what you say. You do? Angel asked, studying each of the calm faces around the table. Yes. The tree's memory is long, but unfortunately we do not share it. These here are the oldest among us, and, therefore, have the most knowledge of our people and our ways. I am ruler by birth, but my advisors exist due to providence. When I find that I cannot make a decision, or doubt the one I have, I seek the guidance of my elders, and they agree with you. Angel was thunderstruck. She had long given up the possibility of convincing Alicia, and was utterly unprepared for the apology, the concession, or the support of the other treekin. She turned to Lark for some kind of verbal support, but he was just as shocked as she was. "So, this means you're going to fight alongside us?" Angel asked tentatively, her heart hammering in her chest from hope. "Yes, our people will help. As much as I would love to be on the field of battle, I need to stay here to oversee our recovery." Turning to Lark, she added with a wry grin, "My niece, Reika, will be leading our troops when the time comes. She is eager to see you again and to meet your mate as well." Angel glanced at Lark and watched a distinct blush that bloomed on his cheeks. Attempting to keep her amusement under control, she focused back on her hosts. "How soon can they mobilize?" Alicia responded with a determined nod. "Now that the blight is cured, we have our speed and stamina back. You will find that we will have no trouble catching up to you when you leave here." Alicia and her advisors offered a celebratory drink, which Lark and Angel declined. Instead, they excused themselves and headed back to the Forerunner. Partway there, when she was sure no one was nearby, she suddenly stopped and grabbed his arm. "So, who's Reika?" Her voice changed a pitch as she spoke, almost as if she was singing, and the smirk on her face was devious. Lark snorted and shook his head. "I met her when I came with my father to visit the star canopies. She gave me a tour of the forest. I was 15. I had a crush, and I made the mortal mistake of telling her." "Ow, ouch," Angel winced. "Ouch indeed. That's how I fell out of the tree. I was attempting to impress her with my physical prowess." "How did that go for you?" Angel asked, as they resumed walking, not bothering to hide her amusement. "About as well as you'd expect. I fell out of the tree. I managed not to cry as I professed my attraction. Then she politely reminded me that her being heir to the matriarch and my being a soldier made our pairing impossible." He shrugged dismissively. "She was right, of course, but she did say I was cute." Angel laughed, unable to hold it back any longer. "Well, she was right. You are cute." "We still talk, from time to time. She leads the training and care of their bonded mounts, and is turning out to be a great leader. She also takes opportunities here and there to make jokes about my confession when we were kids." "I think I'm going to like her," Angel approved whimsically. "I know you will, and I think that's what scares me the most," he added. The sun was rising over the southern seas. Darkos stood on the battlements of Lifesever as he went over the reports he had been handed barely an hour before. But behind him knelt an acolyte, the messenger who had brought the documents. The man's entire body was rigid and trembled in agony. Invisible talons scratched and gripped his skull, sending bolts of searing pain whenever he moved. His muscles were so tense that it felt like his thigh bones might snap at any moment. "Jita." A single word, an unmistakable command. The talons receded, and the acolyte collapsed. He had no thought of relief, and instead shot up to run at top speed to find his target. Darkos leaned forward and rested one hand on the stony barrier between him and the ocean below. He stared placidly at the brightening streaks of pale yellow and pinks as he waited. Soon, he felt a calming presence behind him, but his expression remained unchanged. Cheetah approached him slowly, as though she were approaching a wild animal. "I am here, master," she proclaimed with a deep bow. "My son tests my patience," Darkos seethed contemptuously. "He's been running amok and undoing all my hard work." She said nothing, allowing him to continue. Darkos cleared his throat and read from the stack of papers, his voice growing in anger and volume with each page. "We have lost communication in Sosaria. This comes on the heel of the palace sending seized conclave documents to the alien vessel. Our language might be compromised." He crumpled the paper and cast it over the battlement. It exploded in a haze of black flame, and the ash was swept up in the coastal winds. "The army we sent to the Stonekin was annihilated with minimal casualties to the population. Talks with the Ravagers were facilitated when our abominations chose to aid their mortal enemies rather than be rid of them once and for all." Another report burned. "The leader of the Ravagers, our infected link to their people, was killed, so we have lost our only foothold inside their pack. With no new reports, I can only assume any trace of the infection in their colony has been successfully treated. The rest of the papers erupted in a blaze of fury, and Jita closed her eyes to protect them from the rogue embers. Now, I have been told that the boy and the ship, that damnable ship, have entered the star canopies. In Sosaria, their doctor skulked around to find a cure for our blight, and I am convinced she has found it. Darkos snarled. At every setback, they have been at the forefront, and I grow weary of their meddling. What of Adura? He had boasted that he would end their interference once and for all, Jita inquired. Anti-magic flared, causing the hewn stone beneath his hand to shatter and cascade into the sea below. That fool has failed once again. My son still plots against me, and the Forerunner still remains outside my reach. His eyes burned with rage, and he swiped the dust from his palm. Somehow, they are achieving what centuries of bargaining and discussion could not. I don't understand. What else can one ship possibly do, she scoffed. Her words ignited his final nerve, and he whipped around to face her, his eyes ablaze with rage and raw magic. They're helping that traitor unite the entire world against us, Darkos roared. The ground beneath him cracked with a sound like glass, and a large fissure snaked beneath her feet. What do you wish of me, master? Jita asked tremulously. Prepare for an assault, he demanded, his voice deathly calm. I want every creation, necromancer, experiment, and agent recalled to life ever. If it can fight, I want it here and ready for battle. I am through being subtle. I will bring that boy to heel and slaughter the crew as he watches. Then, as he realizes he is truly alone, I will be the only hope he has left. Jita nodded nervously. Even with his mercurial moods, she had never seen him as enraged as he was now. And Idura? What shall we do if he also returns? He stared at her, and his face broke into a dark smile. I want him ripped apart, with every piece of him strung up around Lifesaver as a warning to anyone else who might have such arrogance. His crimson eyes had a steely glint that told Jita she was not exempt from that warning. You are my new second-in-command. Go now and take forth my orders. Do not fail me. Jita bowed and hurried to the summoning chamber, where she could communicate with agents in the field. If her master was right, they needed to prepare for a fight that would decide the fate of Durance once and for all. That brings us to the end of chapter 20. Elysian redeemed herself, listening to advisors that have solid heads on their shoulders. That's a redeeming point for sure. So that was a nice follow-up meeting. It's very nice to see Maya take the spotlight as the cure she developed is rushing through the population and the canopies. So it's new friends, new allies, and everyone feeling much the better for it. And then the little cutaway to Darkos and the over at Liferend was a nice touch. Kind of lets you know that shit's going down. Pulling back in to go full defensive is kind of sets the tone for, big climactic clash at the end. The allies have been collected. The fellowship is together, and everyone is charging off into the dark for a big climactic clash. But then something tells me that we haven't seen the last of Adura. Whether it be it's hard telling whether he's going to continue to be a thorn in the side in this storyline, or if he's going to pull a bit of a Soren of Margoth and step aside for now, and after the conclusion of this storyline, if he'll be a thorn in the side out and beyond. Or he could be finished in this book. I don't know. It's hard telling right now. There's not a whole lot of foreshadowing as far as Adura is concerned, but something tells me he might stick back for now and be a recurring annoyance He seems to be ambitious and evil, but not stupid. So, if he knows that Lark and the Forerunner are still in the field, he's probably too smart to go back to Life Friend. But we'll see. Sometimes evil is dumb. Might go back and not be in for a warm welcome. All right. So we've got this next chapter is a little on the. All right, let's get through the next one before we take a break. That'll push us to probably about 10, 15 after, and then we'll go from there. And so, chapter 21. So much has been lost in our history. It will take everything we have learned to find it again. Sorry, Lily called back to Dravik after nearly bowling him over while he was busily crouched with his focus on a damaged panel. She was running as fast as she could through the Forerunner to try and find Lark. He had been given his own datapad after they had left Sosaria, but to many of the crew's frustration, he often left it lying around in favor of using his armlet or talking to someone in person. His pad signal was coming from his room, and she hoped that, for once, it was with him. Once at his door, she adjusted her glasses and knocked firmly. After a full minute, she knocked once more and held her pad to her chest in an attempt to stop fidgeting. Looking for Lark? Maya's voice startled her from down the hall. The doctor was headed to his shift in the medical bay. Yes, have you seen him? She inquired excitedly. I think he's in the mess hall with Bastian, Maya called back. With a hurried thank you, Lily rushed to the upper level and ran to the mess hall, this time being careful to give Dravik a wide berth, who was still grumbling and resuming his work. When she finally reached the open space, she spied him sharing a meal with Bastian. It warmed her heart that, although Bastian could sometimes wear people's patience thin, Lark still made time to discuss the history of Durance. She approached the table and waited patiently to speak. So, the Stonekin used crystals they harvest from the mines for fire magic, and the Treekin used petrified remains of trees for essence magic, Bastian recited, as he scribbled notes in his journal. Yes, Sosaria tried to create a trading agreement with the Treekin for the stones, but, unsurprisingly, they refused. You won't find one outside of the Star Canopies unless one of them carries it. Suddenly, noticing Lily waiting, he focused on her with a warm smile. How can I help you? I need to thank you for getting those beautiful saplings from the Treekin. She all but yelled as she crouched down to be almost at eye level with him. They're the most beautiful trees I've ever seen in my life. When I asked about getting samples at first, they said no, but I didn't know what you did. But I really love them. You should be thanking Angel then. She's the one who convinced the matriarch that they could be grown on your home world and would be well taken care of, he explained. Are you sure? I don't want to bother her, she asked quietly. Lark chuckled. You'll be fine. Just be direct with her. She actually enjoys the conversation and compliments, despite what she might say. With a grateful half-bow, she apologized for interrupting the conversation, and took off once more. A quick scan of her pad showed Angel was in the medical bay with Akron and Maya. Lily breathed a sigh of silent thanks that at least they always had their pads on them. Lily momentarily considered sending a message to convey her thanks, but decided she wanted to do it in person. She briefly wondered if Lark's preference for in-person contact was rubbing off somewhat. When Lily opened the door to medical, she saw Maya at her desk, Angel in front of her, and Akron leaning against the treatment table. They were talking amongst themselves, but she didn't get the impression it was private. Angel! She exclaimed, as she flew across the room and took Angel's hands in her own. Is something wrong? Angel's eyes were filled with panic as she looked at the other crewwoman up and down. Not at all! I just had to say how much I loved the tree saplings you got for us. Lily looked ready to cry from excitement. Akron and Maya shared an amused glance and watched the pair with curiosity. Angel felt a bit overcome by the exchange, but offered Lily a kind smile anyway. It wasn't a big deal, really. They just have strict rules about the trees growing on other parts of Durance. Once I told them we wanted to grow them on our world, they were delighted at the idea of their trees seeing another planet with new experiences. Well, I promise I will take excellent care of them until we get home. Her eyes suddenly lit up. Do you want one in your room? The trees are already glowing, and it would make a lovely light to read by. That would be great, thank you, Angel gasped, and her face was full of sincere gratitude. Lily squeezed her hand one last time before returning to the hydroponics bay. As I was saying, you did remarkably well with the treatkin, Ockran resumed. It sounds as though Lily and Lark both agree as well. Lark gave you a report? Angel raised an eyebrow. Ockran grinned. Yes. He was extremely detailed about the heated debate between you and Alicia. I believe he used the word terrified on more than one occasion. I know, Angel admitted sheepishly. I was lucky the exchange turned out okay. Luck had nothing to do with it, Maya interjected. You handled the use of the cure perfectly, and then, when talks of their joining the Alliance became rocky, you skillfully made it work and avoided a diplomatic crisis, albeit narrowly. Even though I yelled at her and lost my temper? Angel asked incredulously. Yes, Maya snickered, turning to her husband. Want to tell her about your first off-world diplomatic mission? Ockran let out a deep breath and shrugged. The magistrate of Varus and I had a disagreement. You punched him, Maya corrected. He hit me first, Ockran threw his hands in the air in exasperation. After you made a comment about one of his concubines having an oversized behind, Maya shook a chastising finger, prompting Angel to laugh. Ockran let out a soft groan. We had too much to drink, and we both made jokes. Then he said how wonderful it was to share an evening with someone he could be completely honest with. So, in my state of intoxication, I made the mistake of being honest with him, Ockran explained. I feel so much better now, Angel remarked, still laughing. Diplomacy is rarely easy. What matters is you find a way to resolve things, Maya reassured. Speaking of resolving things, what is the situation with our allies? Ockran asked, eager to change the subject. Angel pulled out her pad and displayed the numerous charts she had created. Beldaz has 5,000 troops and 100 energy tanks ready for battle. Drossin will be leading a force of 500 Ravagers. Just 500? I thought he could spare more. Considering what is at stake here, Ockran scoffed, with a strong hint of irritation in his voice. Don't forget, their population isn't as large as the other races, and they're extremely strong and swift in their beast forms. Not to mention, with their immunity to magic, they can be used to assault magical targets, or defend better against magical attacks, Maya reminded him. Good point, he conceded. They're probably each worth 10 in battle. Reika will leave a force of 3,000 archers and 500 bonded riders, Angel continued. Those big rabbits? How effective are they in a fight? Having missed seeing them himself, Ockran's curiosity was piqued. They're incredibly fast. They're faster than Sosarian striders at full speed, and their legs can break metal armor. They also have a strong emotional bond with their rider, so they function as a perfectly synchronous unit in combat, Angel explained further. They use lances, bows, and some air magic. What about Sosaria? They have the most mages. Healers and fighters with essence magic would be invaluable if they're going to assault the Conclave with a huge army, Maya pressed. Angel ran her thumb along the pad's casing. I haven't been unable to get a hold of them. Beldaz said he was able to get in contact with Syndra, but couldn't confirm anything as of yet. It could take a while to get any support from Sosaria. I doubt we will be able to wait on them, Lark's voice called as he entered the room. Once Darko sees an army gathering towards him, he isn't going to sit and wait for us to be at full strength to attack him. Angel felt a wave of relief that he joined the conversation, despite the ominous nature of his statement. He strode over and sat on the bed beside her. What do you think they'll do? Maya frowned. Between his assault on the Stone Talons being thwarted, the Ravagers being saved from their corruption, and the Blight being cured, he's watching us carefully to see what we do next, Lark dictated. He probably suspects we're going to make a move against the Conclave itself. The moment he is certain, he's going to recall every able body back to Lifesaver. Then, he'll prepare whatever tricks he can to stop us. How much of an army will we be facing? Ockran furrowed his brow and looked to his pad at the Allied forces' numbers. Hundreds of necromancers and millions of monsters, Lark replied solemnly. And that's only a guess. We have no intelligence for what else he has inside the castle. He took a deep breath and with a painful look on his face. What's worse is that the army isn't our biggest problem. What's worse than millions of monsters? Angel practically shouted. Lifesaver itself. It's enormous, twice as big as the castle at Sosaria, and has a deep underground keep full of laboratories, storage rooms, and who knows what else. even if we destroy the army. I have no idea how to penetrate the castle itself, and they could store entire legions in there if they need to. Sounds like we'll need to use a neutron charge, Akron declared after a long minute of contemplation. A what charge? Lark's eyebrow raised in confusion. It's a devastatingly powerful weapon, Maya clarified as she looked at her husband, concern evident on her face. It's basically a condensed star that erupts at whatever we shoot the charge at. Why haven't you used it before? Lark shot to his feet, his voice rising from frustration. It would have been invaluable in many situations up until now. Because we only have 4 of them for our entire journey. Akron stood and ran his fingers through his hair. He looked as though the decision was weighing heavily on his mind. And these things aren't just a big explosion. They can take out huge ships, or even a small chunk of a planet. Lark thought back to the battles they had been in since the Forerunner arrived, and realized the weapons would have caused far more destruction than it would have helped them. Good reason, he admitted with a sigh. But even then, I don't know how effective it will be. The castle itself is protected by entropy magic. What if we enhanced one of the charges with an essence magic frequency? Angel asked absently, as she brought up her frequency research data. What? When did you even figure that out? Angel turned to her, shocked. I haven't yet, but I got to scan one of the essence stones the tree can have, and they have a compatible molecular structure with our energy prisms. I think if we can borrow one, it might give us what we need to find the frequency, Angel explained excitedly. I'll make sure they can spare one, Lark promised. Captain, with your permission, she started. Don't bother asking me. Go get the stone and get to it, Akron interrupted. He pointed to the door, and the pair jumped up to follow orders. Maya walked over to stand beside her husband as soon as they were alone. Just might have a chance, she said barely above a whisper. It won't be easy, Akron remarked. But with all of us joining together, we'll have the numbers. And thanks to those two, we might just be able to finish this once and for all. Those two and, a space nuke. I mean, that certainly helps, right? The next day, Angel sat on the floor, cross-legged, next to one of the neutron charges. It was encased in an oval-shaped chamber that was 15 centimeters thick and made of a strong alloy Lark didn't recognize. On top was a rectangular interface, which Lark's datapad was currently plugged into, or with Angel's datapad was currently plugged into. As she rapidly entered in commands in complex formula, Lark stood with his back against the bay wall, his eyes glued to the casing. You can relax, Lark. It's not going to explode, Angel admonished playfully. It's just hard to take in, he marveled quietly. Something so small that could be so destructive. What about you? I've seen you use some really powerful attacks when you fight. She countered. That's different. Taking out a rot giant, a large group of withered, or a part of a building is one thing. However, I don't think I could destroy a small chunk of a planet, as Akron put it. He swallowed hard. Sorry, Teams is chiming in the background there. It doesn't go off unless the proper protocol is observed. It needs to be loaded into one of our launchers, armed by 2 separate officers simultaneously, and only then can it detonate after it's launched. I promise we're safe. She held her hand out her hand and reached for him to join her. Now, come over here and help. I won't be able to see if this works without you. Lark took one step, then another, and approached the small device. Her theory had been successful, and they discovered the frequency of essence magic the night before through a small polished black stone that had been a progenitor of the tree of the star canopies, gifted by Alicia herself, in lieu of her usual desire to double and triple check. The results. Angel insisted they try to use it with the neutron charge as soon as they could, and despite his fears, Lark gave no argument. Angel's brow furrowed in concentration as her fingers flew between the two devices. Finding himself himself wishing to retreat again from the weapon, and not knowing what to do, Lark took a deep breath. So, how do these things work, exactly? Well, do you know what a neutron star is? She gazed up at him, taking a moment to pause her work. Lark shook his head. It's a special type of star that is incredibly dense. Most are only the size of small cities, but they have the same density as normal-sized stars. During one of our first space explorations, a vessel found a dead neutron star. Then, using a specialized containment field, we were able to harvest a small portion of it. Entering another command, the casing slowly slid open, and Lark took an unconscious step back. Inside was a clear cylinder that spanned the length of the case. It glowed faintly, with a shifting white light that cast rainbows all over the room. Inside was a single black speck. Each neutron charge has a fragment of that star, about the size of a grain of sand. The containment field keeps its density and gravitational forces at bay. With me so far? Angel checked. Lark jerked his head in acknowledgement, but his eyes were still trained on the fragment. I think so, but how does such a tiny thing cause a massive explosion? We induce a chemical reaction that reignites it. She tapped a finger on the back of the end of the charge. The reaction only lasts a millisecond, but it's enough to burst free from the containment field and hit the target with all the force of an ignited star fragment. He stared intently at the device and opened his mouth to speak again, but was interrupted by the speck shifting and suddenly glowing brilliant white to overshadow the light around it. Angel closed it and again compared the readings between the neutron charge and her pad. I think it's done. Can you feel essence magic coming from it? She asked in hopeful excitement. Yes, it's intense, he admitted quietly. Are you sure? Put your hand on it to see if you can feel it, she instructed. He looked up with narrowed eyes and practically growled, I am not touching this thing. I can tell from here that it's infused with essence magic. Angel almost argued further, but she reminded herself that he wouldn't lie or muddy the truth on something so important. As he stepped away from the charge once more, a thought struck him. Why do you need such destructive weapons? What do you mean? She asked, in as calm a voice as she could muster. As she unplugged from the charge, apprehension crept into her mind about the impending conversation. Weapons like this aren't designed without a purpose, he clarified, with a note of suspicion. Are you at war? Angel sighed and entered the final results into her pad. She was uncertain of how to answer, and had hoped it would be Akron having this conversation and not her. She easily moved the lightweight casing without much effort, maneuvering it into its spot as she pondered her answer. Finally, she turned to him and gave a single nod. There is a terrible enemy back home. They call themselves the Children of Alpha. They are the reason we develop neutron charges, and one reason we are exploring space, trying to find resources and allies. We're not at war yet, but we prepare, since it's most likely coming. He folded his arms and leveled his gaze at her. And I'm guessing there's a reason I haven't heard about them until now. We're trapped here, until the conclave is dealt with, so the captain didn't want to bring it up until things were resolved. He didn't want to burden anyone with our problems, and didn't want it to appear as though our help would be contingent on reciprocity. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, and, after giving it some thought, I agree with him. We should deal with the bigger threat to everyone before we burden you with something that only affects us. His eyes searched hers for any signs that she was still holding something back, but finding none, he finally conceded. I suppose that does make sense. She kissed his cheek and smiled. I wouldn't want you to think I was keeping anything from you. Not without an important reason, anyway. Physical affection from her was a surefire way to disarm him, and they were both perfectly aware of that. He slid his arms around her waist and nuzzled her neck. I might have argued that I should know, but I understand your caution. His gaze turned to the enhanced charges casing that sat innocently in its chamber before adding, even though some of your secrets scare me out of my mind. He placed his hand on the small of her back and steered her out of the supply bay and away from the destructive weapon. Let's go have some dinner and talk about something that has nothing to do with weapons or exploding stars, he insisted, feeling immense relief as the door shut behind him. Angel shook her head and planted her feet to the ground. No, Akron wanted us to report to his quarters when we finished. Bastian has something important to tell us. This time, She grabbed his hand and led him toward the captain's room. He followed with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. He had only experienced small doses of Bastian's verbosity, and knew this would be much more extreme. One sec, I need to get a message out. Okay. When they entered Akron's quarters, Bastian was bouncing excitedly to see them as he clutched a datapad to his chest. On the ornate dining table were half a dozen stacks of perfectly arranged sheets of paper and 2 more datapads. You're finally here, Akron practically yelled with joy. Maya stood behind him with a glimmer of amusement in her eyes as she patted his shoulder. How's the neutron charge? Akron rapidly asked before Bastian could initiate the presentation. Fully functional, Angel touched the pad holstered at her side. I sent you a full report, but we both confirmed that the weapon has been fully infused with essence magic. Good job, Akron approved with a satisfied clap. We'll run more tests to ensure it stays stable, and if it all goes smoothly, we'll have a big surprise for the Conclave. Sir, if I may, Bastian asked, sounding as though he was about to burst. Yes, Grumman, we are all here now, so you can give us your presentation. Akron sighed and motioned for Angel and Lark to sit in the chairs that were placed closest to the presentation table. Thank you. He separated the papers in a frenzy, then, lining them all perfectly, cleared his throat and took the first pad in hand. I have spent considerable time translating Conclave documents, as well as getting detailed historical data from each of the races we have visited. And I have made what is quite possibly the most important discovery of our time since the invention of the Nova Drive, he declared happily. Despite his enthusiasm, he was met with only silence and blank stares. Taking a deep breath, he opened his arms to gesture to the papers gathered before him. I have come to the conclusion that the people of Durance and Soledad share a common origin point, he announced. I suspected as much, Maya concurred. It was too much of a coincidence that we're the same race, speaking the same language. Our people must have come from Durance, or they somehow migrated from Soledad. No, you don't understand. Bastian's hands trembled as he pointed to the 2 side-by-side documents. Our people settled on Soledad 1,200 years ago, he explained. And upon doing so, they destroyed all but their most basic technology and left nothing about where they came from. Oh, I remember that from classes at the Institute, Angel said, and Bastian shot her an approving grin. After comparing historical records from the people of Durance, I can say with certainty that they did the exact same thing also 1,200 years ago. Bastian slammed his palms on the table from excitement, and a few pages fluttered to the ground. Wait. So you mean my people came here at the same time yours settled on your planet? Then they covered up where they came from? Lark summarized slowly as his brain processed the information. Exactly, Bastian murmured as he regarded the precious documents before him. It was the same time frame and with the same goal. Conclave accepted, of course. I can't speculate what secrets and technology they might have within their walls. So that means, Angel began, the populations of both planets came from the same home and settled hundreds of light years away from each other at the same time, Bastian finished triumphantly. Incredible, Maya breathed. But that still doesn't explain why they have magic and we don't. Is there anything in the historical records that explains that? No, Bastian nimbly scanned through his notes. Every record indicates the population of Durance had magic when they first arrived here. The difference between our peoples is one of the big mysteries I look forward to solving. I'd rather know why they left, Lark declared as they moved forward to examine the papers. I doubt they relocated entire populations and covered their tracks on a whim. I agree. Maya picked up one of the pads and began to skim through the information. It was probably some kind of natural disaster or catastrophe, so horrible they couldn't stay. But that doesn't explain why they would separate the way they did. Hopefully, when the Conclave is defeated, we can get more information, Angel stated, as she gave a cursory look to the papers before her. Is that it, then? I'm due back on the bridge. Akron stood with a loud crack and rubbed his neck absently. Well, yes, but I could go into great detail about the comparison between the records. Bastion's enthusiasm waned at the loss of his audience. Maya gave a slight nudge to Akron and gathered the fallen papers in her hands. I'll stay, and you can tell me all about it, Bastion. I'm genuinely curious about everything you've discovered here. Bastion nearly squealed in delight and sat in the now vacant seat beside Maya. Now, with a captive and willing audience, he barely noticed the other three had left the room. That wasn't so bad this time, Akron exclaimed. You're getting better about reining in your frustration, Angel observed as he stifled a laugh. Well, it helps that I have Maya to run interference occasionally, he conceded before parting from the couple to head to the bridge. This is a lot to take in, Angel sighed, feeling the weight of the discovery on her mind now that they were alone. I agree. I figured our two worlds might be distantly related, but having the same shared home and background? It's extraordinary. Lark's voice was filled with amazement as he gazed to the door, where Bastion was still lecturing away. You could stay for more information if you want, she offered as she bumped him with her shoulder. Oh, no, I'm satisfied with history for the time being. Right now, I want us to eat and have some time alone before we have to stop the ship again. He grinned and nearly dragged her to the mess hall. That brings us to the end of chapter 21. So, space nukes, magic space nukes, and does the Prime Directive count if you're the same species? I don't know. So, there's things happening with Lark has pretty accurately guessed what Darkos' plan is going to be. He's going to see the forces arrayed before him, which actually he already has. He knows what's coming, and sort of pull in the defensive lines to a stronghold. So Lark understands how Darkos thinks. Maybe not quite immediately, but he knows what's going on. So I think everyone knows it's all coming to a head very quickly. But with that, I need to top up my drink. I've got a little bit of a cough coming on, so I'd rather not subject you guys to that. So let's take a few minutes here to break off, and we'll be back in just a little bit when I've topped up, and we will see where the story will take us next. All right, thanks, guys. Okay, we are back. And yes, it is little Miss Zoe's birthday today. She is 2, and you would not believe it by how big she's gotten. So, we'll see how quickly Simba can catch up, but for now, she's enjoying her little special day, and we'll leave it at that. Yeah, the ragdolls do be getting pretty large. Um, my Roomba cannot keep up. We'll see how well that lasts in over time. It was bad enough with one. With 2 of them, once Simba's adult coat comes in, it might be curtains for poor little Roomba. Exactly. Pet birthdays are very important. I've not been great about tracking them, but definitely got them on the calendar now. There's actually quite a lot of variance in ragdoll sizes. From what I've seen, male ragdolls can get like anywhere from 15 to 25 pounds. So he might just be a big old boy. See, we got all sorts of fun little turns of phrases around here. We got Chekhov's sword, we got magic space nukes. Just plumb the depths for ideas. It's fun. Alright guys, let's go ahead and jump right back into things because we've got a little bit more than half an hour left, and I think we can really see some interesting things starting to happen. Yeah, 12 is pretty big for a domestic short hair. My last cat, Johnny, he topped out about 14, but he was a chunky lad. I think once he trimmed down, he settled around 12 like that. So cats got a bit of a variance, don't they? All right, let's get back to the reading. If I let myself, I will talk about the kitties all night long. So, chapter 22. One must be pushed to their limits to discover how to surpass them. Lark stood atop the Forerunner and enjoyed the feeling of the sun warming his back as he kept watch over the crew. Over the last few days, the neutron charge had been inspected more times than he could count, and to everyone's relief, it was maintaining the essence magic signature. In 2 days, they were to meet their allies at the exact location where the ship landed on the planet, or the ship first landed on the planet. The only thing left to do was to refuel the ship. The fuel cells were just under 80%, but the entire crew agreed they should be at full capacity for the upcoming fight. The kelp samples they had gathered were being used to cultivate more, which left foraging for more plants. The field was thick with carpets of vines and bushes. After last time, Lark insisted that he have a sentinel's view of the field, while everyone worked. He was on edge, and determined not to let anything happen to them. All 4 junior crew members were in the field, along with Lauren and Tarn, harvesting the vegetation. The heavy weight of the rebel's heart lay between his shoulders. He had practiced endlessly in the recreation room, and finally mastered its length and extra heft. His previous weapons were small enough to wield from his side, but not this one. Thankfully, Reynard was able to step in and fashion a baldric so he could access it from over his shoulder. For the 100th time, after leaving the Ravager's colony, he wondered if he should be wielding such an important weapon. However, the way it naturally enhanced his essence magic had made it invaluable in saving the lives of his friends and the woman he loved. So he was determined to keep it with him. Thinking of Angel brought a smile to his lips and brought him from his contemplative brooding. For years, he had watched his parents together and often wondered if he would ever find his own partner. Now that he did, he couldn't imagine ever being without her. Her intelligence, sharp wit, and how she could make him laugh brought him unimaginable joy. The feeling of her in his arms made his spirit soar, and the first time in many years he didn't feel alone. A fear crept into the back of his mind about the coming battle and needled him about the worst-case scenarios. Just as quickly, though, he could almost hear his mother chiding him, "Don't let the future stop you from enjoying the present." From the left side of his vision, he saw a flicker of movement. There was a large group of shrubs that led to the tree line, and for a second the leaves trembled as though shaken. He waited several long moments before dismissing it and turning his attention back to the crew. He thought to himself it must have been an animal that was scared off. A minute passed by, and he saw the movement again. A flash of gold emerged from the foliage and crouched as it watched the crew like a predator. The figure paused when they saw a lark staring in their direction, and they lowered the cowl of the robe. Blonde hair glimmered in the moonlight, and he saw a mocking grin stretch across the familiar face. "Get back to the ship!" Lark bellowed as he leaped off the bow. "What's going on?" Reynard demanded as his hand flew to his weapon and searched wildly around. "It's Adora," Lark called as he raced to the shrubs the necromancer had disappeared into. "Tell Akron, and be on the lookout for more monsters." He didn't bother to see if they were following his command. He crashed through the underbrush and followed the sound of footsteps and maniacal laughter to a small clearing far beyond the bushes where a small grove of dead trees stood, with Adora at its center. "Good to see you, Defiler. After you somehow escaped my trap, I kept an eye on you until a better chance to kill you came along," Adora greeted cheerfully. A necromancer had been forced to his knees in front of Adora. His arms were tied to his sides, and a gag was between his teeth. The man stared fearfully at Lark and screamed wordlessly into the cloth. "Meet my friend." Adora's voice carried across the field, empowered by intense joy. "I don't actually know his name. I just came across him during my morning stroll." "I don't need to know his name to kill him," Lark snarled. "I've been waiting for this day for a long time." He drew the rebel's heart into his hands, the blade shimmering with essence magic. Adora hauled the necromancer to a standing position and hissed into his ear, "Your life is forfeit." The man whimpered as his brown eyes looked into the icy blues. "If you want to bring honor to yourself and the Conclave, you know what to do, right?" He closed his eyes and took a shuddering breath, and Adora knew that he was ready. Pulling a wicked knife from his belt, he scraped the blade alongside the man's jugular. Rather than resist, he visibly relaxed and even pressed his skin against the bite of the knife. Adora grinned and slashed downward from throat to hip. Blood sprayed across the grass, and the necromancer staggered. He ripped the gag from his mouth and howled through bloody lips, "My life for power! My body for magic! My soul for chaos!" Lark gasped in horror as the man's form began to twist and bulge. A black glow radiated from its heart and throbbed entropy magic. Lark slashed the air, sending a shockwave of essence magic at the abomination, but it dissipated into the black energy like a lazy breeze as it continued to grow. A loud crack rang through the clearing, and it groaned as bones stretched and elongated. Its skin burst and thick corded muscles erupted across its body. Sharp fingerbones pierced skin and grew into long, wicked claws. The once brown eyes shifted to scarlet red and glowed with a haunting light. It now stood well over 2 meters tall and dripped blood from torn skin as it completed its transformation. Heavy, rasping breath escaped from its lipless mouth, dripping saliva from long, needle-sharp teeth. It opened its jaw impossibly wide and roared loud enough to shake the trees. It was all the warning Lark needed about what would happen next. "Have fun," Adora called to him as he bolted away. Claws spread open as the monster rushed down on Lark, shrugging off any essence attacks as insignificant. Lark snarled as he watched yet another attack fade into nothingness. Just as the monster was bearing down on him, he jerked his hand up, feeling the pull of earth magic as it grasped soil and rock to shoot up and form a wall. Bracing himself with his shoulder and sword, he prepared to defend against the onslaught. The creature did not hesitate and bent forward to slam its head into the barrier. Despite his best efforts, the monster shattered his stony protection, and he was thrown back into the trunk of a tree. He summoned a cushion of air to soften the blow, but his back still blazed with agony as the bark bit into his spine. With a strangled grunt, the wind was knocked from his lungs, and he lay dazed for a moment. As his eyes came into focus, he saw the monster approaching him. A long, slimy tongue lashed across its teeth, cutting it and leaving a bloody trail in its wake. Powered with urgency, Lark stumbled to his feet, gripped his sword, and charged the monster with a large overhead slash. It did not bother to block or deflect, and the weapon struck its flesh as useless as a wet reed. He screamed in anger and pressed the assault. This time, he flipped the sword in his hand and attempted to ram it through the monster's visible organs. Once again, the attack bounced off harmlessly. From its mouth and the gaps between its ribs came a deep, chuffing laugh. Lark had no time to react before its deadly sharp claws slashed across his chest, just beneath his collarbone. He gasped and coughed blood before it threw him hard into the tree again, and with a loud crack, splinters showered on him as he lay on the ground, trying to regain his senses. This time, it approached him languidly and clicked its dripping claws together. Lark's mind ran wild with what he could possibly do to stop it. He knew that if he didn't end it here, it would finish him off and go after the Forerunner next. It would kill Angel. He spat out a mouthful of blood and felt his wrath rising. He hated how helpless he felt, and the need to destroy caused his vision to darken until all he could see was the monster. He thought back to the electric field and how helpless he felt, despite trying everything. Feeling the searing hatred in his chest, it reminded him he hadn't tried everything yet. His desperation locked onto his last forbidden option. His mind screamed and railed against him, damning himself for what he was about to do. However, his determination to protect those he cared for won out, and he focused his rage on a singular point he could harness. Despite his pain and exhaustion, he raised his weapon at the monster. He focused again on its chest and let loose a blast of entropy magic. The feeling of impact escaped his arm, and the air around him stirred. However, there was no shimmer of magic or sensation of the power leaving his hand. Suddenly, only a second after his attack, it jerked, and its entire upper half disappeared. The lower half fell lifelessly just inches before him and was still. His arm fell to his side, and the sword clattered as it hit the dry ground. Panting, he slid to his knees, his mind still trying to process what had just transpired. He had seen entropy magic used many times before, but it was never anything like that. This was almost nothingness, as if his magic failed, yet somehow it still destroyed the monster. Battle cries tore through the tree line as most of the Forerunner crew burst through the foliage with weapons drawn. The group fanned out before coming to a stop as they noticed the creature dead in front of Lark. Angel immediately knelt before him to inspect his wounds. Tarn and Dravik investigated what remained of the monster, and Akron barked a message into his pad to alert the crew on the ship that the situation was safe. "What the hell happened here?" Akron demanded as he holstered his weapon. The necromancer transformed. He did some kind of entropy blood ritual and changed into that thing. Lark weakly motioned to the body. At first, I couldn't touch him, but then... His voice went quiet, and he buried his face in his hands. Akron closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Get him into the medical bay and make sure he's okay. Maya will examine what's left of this thing and see if we can get some answers." Angel obeyed and helped Lark to his feet before carefully guiding him back to the ship. Adura sat in the boughs of the tallest tree and watched as the Forerunner crew took the Defiler and the corpse back to their ship. He numbly slid down the trunk and heard the dry soil crunch beneath his shoes. He stood, panting and shaking as he stared hard at where his prey had laid helpless minutes ago. Twice he had formed a perfect plan. Twice he had found impossible ways to capture the ship where essence magic would have been useless. Yet somehow, twice, the Defiler found a way to not only survive the trap, but the entire crew was left intact as well. Making a fist, Adura struck the tree with a scream of rage. A lick of fire raced from his knuckles up the bark. The leaves burst into flames. The trunk groaned before exploding in a hail of burning splinters. "What will it take to kill you?" he screamed to the sky, with falling embers in fury and frustration. He felt a slight sting on his face and absently pulled a splinter the size of his pinky from his cheek. Nothing else mattered at that point. This new attack gave Adura pause, though. He would have to learn a way around it, when he was finally ready to try murdering the insolent child again. As the flames spread to more trees, Adura walked deeper into the hedges. Soon, he reached the other side, where his vehicle awaited him, and climbed inside. Wiping the oozing blood from his cheek, he opened a transmission to Lifesaver. A trembling face with wide eyes appeared to greet him. "Hello, Acolyte," Adura greeted with a forced smile. He had already forgotten the name of the man who had been spared Darkus's wrath the day he was brutally chastised. He had taken the man on as a minion of sorts, and so far he'd proven useful. "Greetings, sir," the man mumbled. Adura's eyes narrowed, and he tilted his head. "Something's wrong." "The Master has issued a decree for your head, sir. He says you failed him in the conclave for the last time, and that you're to be made an example of," he reported, refusing to make eye contact with his superior. With an annoyed groan, Adura sat back against his high-backed chair. "So, it's come to this at last, I see. What other news? I heard a report that we are all supposed to return home." The Acolyte nodded frantically. "Yes, the Defiler has amassed enough allies that that are about to invade Lifesaver itself." Adura pondered the new information. If he had succeeded, he could have single-handedly stopped the invasion. But now the conclave might truly fall. He steepled his fingers and pondered his options. One thing was certain. He needed to save his own hide. "You're going to help me get into the laboratories. My laboratory, specifically," Adura commanded. "How will I do that?" the Acolyte stammered. "You've been smart enough to survive until now. I'm sure you'll be able to figure it out," Adura retorted with a wry smile. "What do you need down there, sir?" he inquired. "A gift the Tellerans left me," Adura replied cryptically, before he cut the transmission and turned his vehicle south through the safety of the undergrowth. "We call them Unbound," Alicia revealed. The video feed was routed from the bridge to medical, where Maya worked on Lark's wounds. They are the result of a necromancer performing a blood ritual to sacrifice their life for entropy magic. Lark stared incredulously at the image on the screen, feeling at a loss. "How long have you known about them?" Angel asked in his stead, as she stood beside the bed he was reclined in. "We've only confirmed it a handful of times in the past few decades," she recounted. "Mostly, the stories are second-hand accounts and rumors. It wasn't until the third instance we discovered it was through a ritual that they use as a last resort. Their restraint doesn't make any sense. That thing was nearly unstoppable. If any necromancer can turn into one, why haven't they used them in battle? The group of them could tear through Sosaria and wipe us out." Lark's voice still rang with disbelief. Alicia's image disappeared briefly before returning as she carried a book. She opened it and began to recite from a passage. "According to our reports, the transformation only lasts minutes at best, and afterward the creature implodes and turns to ash." "Good. I would hate to think that they're a secret weapon Darkus is saving for us," he glowered. "But reports also say that none of our attacks could affect them during that time. No magic, weapon, or force would be able to stop them. Our only strategy was to run and avoid the creature until their magic ran out. Yet, you were somehow able to destroy it?" She closed the book, watching him intently. "Yes, I still don't know how I did it," Lark lied, and looked at his hands clenched on his thighs. Angel glanced at him, and her eyebrows raised in surprise at what she sensed was his deception. "I see," the matriarch sighed, visibly crestfallen, and almost pleaded. "If you discover their weakness, our people would be very interested to know. Please." "Why didn't you tell anyone about this before?" Angel asked when Lark continued to stay silent. She couldn't help but feel a spike of exasperation at their new allies for withholding such vital information. We had no reason to assume others didn't know about it, Alicia shrugged. Also, if you recall, we have mostly kept ourselves closed off from the rest of Durance until you came along. I understand, and we appreciate this information now. We'll let you know if we learn anything new, Angel promised. You are most welcome. Reika confirms that she is progressing well and will meet you at the intended time. With a formal farewell, they ended the transmission, and when the screen was dark, Angel sat next to Lark on the bed and patiently waited for him to dress. She watched him curiously as he slowly changed from the thin medical top to a new tunic. I hope you'll be more honest with me, she asserted, tilting her head to peer at him. I used entropy magic, he whispered, as he refused to look at her. Her breath froze in her throat. She suspected as much, but seeing the anguish on his face broke her heart. I had no idea entropy magic could do that, she murmured. It doesn't, though, he seethed, threw the blanket aside, and leaped out of bed. I've fought the Conclave most of my life, and I have never seen it do that before. It was like nothingness. It also defies science, Maya's voice interjected from across the medical bay. She stepped away from the dead monster and strapped to the table, and stopped next to Angel across from Lark. We've been seeing that since we got here, Angel commented dryly. No, you don't understand. Everything we've seen magic do still follows certain rules. Fire magic burns, air magic alters natural air patterns, and even the healing effects of essence magic can be tracked and understood scientifically, Maya explained, holding up her pad. But this, whatever you did, it did something that should have been impossible. Oh, hang on, I think my camera just died. Alright, there we go. Alright. No, you don't understand. We've seen magic do... Everything we've seen magic do still follows certain rules. Fire magic burns, air magic alters natural air patterns, and even the healing effects of essence magic can be tracked and understood scientifically, Maya explained, holding up her pad. But this, whatever you did, it did something that should have been impossible. It destroyed matter at an atomic level. What? Angel exclaimed, grabbing Maya's pad and reading it intently as she began to pace. Why is that significant? I see things destroyed all the time, Lark groaned in exasperation. Matter, as we know it, cannot be destroyed. It just becomes chemically altered into a different state. Fire burns wood, turning it into ash and smoke. The object's basic elements and chemistry still exist in different forms. Whatever you did to the Unbound, as they call it, erased part of it from existence, Maya explained, shaking her head in disbelief. I can't believe this, Angel remarked quietly, putting the pad down and focusing back on him. How did you do that? I told you, I don't know, he snapped and threw his hands up. Since I've never used it before, maybe using that cursed magic caused an unnatural catastrophe. His voice dripped with sarcasm and anger. Angel rolled her eyes, unfazed, and firmly poked his shoulder. That's not helpful. If we have to fight more of these creatures, and you have a way to stop them, we need to figure out what it is. I know, he sighed in resignation. I don't know. I hate that I did it, and how it felt horrible. I don't know how to describe it. Angel wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her forehead against his. Maya recognized the private moment and excused herself to resume examining the body. Lark enveloped Angel in his arms and took a deep breath to calm himself. Lazily stroking circles on his back, she slowly got lost in the sensation of his touch, when a thought struck her. She pulled back and glanced frantically around the room until her eyes landed on his sword. You used it through the rebel's heart, she whispered. I did? Lark blinked in confusion and followed her gaze to the weapon. He closed his eyes, appearing as though the memory pained him, but he finally nodded. Yes, I did. That shouldn't have worked. Angel broke away and placed her fingers on her chin as she contemplated out loud. Entropy magic and essence magic are supposed to be complete opposites. So, with Rebel's heart being a weapon infused with essence magic, it should have repelled your use of entropy magic. That's right. I wasn't even thinking at the time, I just needed a weapon. He hesitated, tilting his head and watching her intently. Perhaps, because you can use both magics, it somehow harmonized and created something entirely new, Angel theorized after several minutes of deep thought. Lark looked to the floor absently, but she didn't know if he had heard her. As she was about to let the conversation drop for the time being, he abruptly whispered, "I hate how it felt." "I can't even imagine what you're going through," she comforted, placing her hand on his. "Do you want to talk about it?" "No," he replied honestly. "I just want to purge the memory from my mind and never think about it again." Angel repressed a frown. She wanted him to deal with his issues and not just bury them, but this was neither the time nor the place for such a discussion. "Let's go to the drive room and double-check the elemental upgrades to the ship," Lark offered and gently caressed her palm with his finger. She knew what he was asking for her sake, and that he would wind up bored or brooding, so she wanted to offer something different. "Actually," she countered, "why don't we go get some food and take it to my room, where we can read and relax?" A grateful smile crossed his lips, and he brushed a kiss against her cheek. "I would love that." That brings us to the end of chapter 22, and again my camera decided to just not. I might need to look into something new, but for now, yep, turning it off and back on seems to do the trick. So, Lark finally tapped into the entropy magic, the birthright from Darkos there. Was kind of waiting for it, for when it would happen, sort of waiting for the shoe to drop. Especially like with the pressure and everything that was happening back with the electrical field at the facility before. To see it happen here when he was pushed again felt natural. And what happened? I mean, it's a lot of power. It's definitely something that he doesn't like, doesn't care to do more, doesn't want to be addicted to. So that's good. That's one of those tropes that tends to come up over and over. Is the protagonist unlocks some new ability and it's just too much for them, and it overcomes them, and they use it constantly. So it's nice to see that it is like diametrically opposed to him. And seeing the two magics sort of weave together like the way they did, presumably through one half of the Archblade and through his own entropy magic, seems to, have a little bit of an antimatter style reaction where it just eliminates the things that come together without the massive explosion. So yeah, it's refreshing to see a main character not discover some dark power and become enraptured with it. So evil, or not necessarily evil, it's just the opposite of the magic he's used, but it's been evil to his culture all along, and keeping that stigma in place, the cultural aversion, is important. So it's nice that it's being shown here. Well, I think, judging from the time, we probably don't have time for another chapter tonight. But we can keep talking. We've got time to chat. And yeah, Adora is slimy. I try and put as much of that into his voice as I can. As much as I don't like Adora, I like voicing him. But Necromancer Starscream is perfect. I love that description. So, we'll see whether his own little personal acolyte is able to get him into the into Lifesever safely, and if he can get into his own laboratory under notice. We definitely haven't seen the last of him. That is true. Failed him for the last time. That's a little on the nose. Probably accidental, but I mean, every evil organization needs someone that's slimy, right? Yeah. So it works. I definitely think that the way things are going, my gut says we'll probably see him one more time. He might have a little bit of a backstab against Darkos before the end, and then he'll vanish off, probably for the rest of the book. And then he'll be a recurring baddie for the next couple of books in the series. Maybe not a big bad, but someone who is a consistent annoyance. But I could be wrong. It could be that they have a big falling out and it's the end. There's no way he's going to turn tail. You just can't do that. But we'll see how it plays out. I've got theories. I'm sure you guys have ideas of your own. Well, I mean, an author's here, so he knows, but I'm not asking for spoilers. If anything, please no. Don't tell me if I'm right. I want to find out myself. But yeah, so that's, as much as we hate him, as much as it's fun to hate him, Adora is one of those characters that kind of catches on. So we'll see what else the story has in store for him. It's one of the biggest temptations of being around, I'm sure. It's a lot of fun for us to discover these things ourselves. So not having them handed to us is appreciated. But as we pass over things, feel free to be like, you were wrong, haha. So, or if we miss anything that should have been a breadcrumb, be like, but yeah, exactly. Adora is spot on for that. There's no redeeming qualities. He's not like a misunderstood villain, and really the Conclave in general isn't, as far as we've seen, they're not like the kind of villains that you run into that are like understandable. You're not meant to sympathize with them or have like, oh, there's mixed motivations, or I understand what they're trying to do. No, they're evil, and Adora exemplifies that in a very different way than Darkos does. Darkos is like the menacing overlord sort of evil. Adora is like the knife in the dark, slimy, oh, what the hell did I touch evil. So you get the two different styles, but they're both unequivocally evil, and it's almost refreshing. You're not trying to like twist your arm into not liking these guys. It's just a natural revulsion, which is nice every once in a while. Looking at something and not having to have complicated feelings is nice. Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Yeah, you got the lawful evil and the chaotic evil, and it works. It works. The counterplay between them is fun to go off of too. That chapter that we have was where they were going back and forth when Adora was reporting was nice. And yeah, Akamos, you're absolutely right. A relatable villain, like some of the best villains are like that. But on the flip side, if you lean heavily into it, it's kind of like the two extremes. You have the relatable villain that you think, you know what, they might be right. I don't like how they're doing it, but they might be right. And then on the flip side, you're just like, on the entire opposite of the spectrum, it's like, no, this guy's a dick. No, not at all. So there's the two sides. A lot of times people will get stuck somewhere in the middle, and it's just not a very relatable villain at that point, or not a very endearing character. Because the pure evil, they're fun to hate. The relatable evil, you're just like, you know what? You got a point. But in between, it doesn't do it for me. All right, guys. Well, we are at about time tonight. And yes, you're right. There's a lot of relatable villains. And whether, like, between the relatable villains and the anti-heroes that are so common in fiction these days, it muddies the waters a little bit. So getting back to roots is fine. Just good versus evil, light and dark. Um, get us some Star Wars clear dichotomy here. So let's go ahead and wrap up here for the night. We will get back to this tomorrow. We are just past 80% of the way through the book. So at this pace, I fully expect us to finish on Sunday, probably with a little bit of time left over to have some discussion about the book afterward. So I'm looking forward to that. If we have time to, if we have time at the end of the session, we'll do so. If we do run tight on time, we'll have a short session on Tuesday to sort of decompress and talk about the book. But I think at this pace, I think we'll have time on Sunday to finish a little early and then talk about the book and our thoughts and ideas for what might come next, or what the backstory could be, or just shoot the shit together. Whatever direction we find ourselves. Talk just kind of goes where it goes. But let's go ahead and wrap up for tonight, and I will look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow as we continue from chapter 23 until wherever we find ourselves. So, all right, have a wonderful night, everyone, and thank you for joining us, and I'll see you next time.